Okay, we're going to go ahead and start. We are going to be filming this one so that we can share this with other faculty and also send it out to our friends. And I just wanted to, first of all, say hello. My name is Erin O'Keefe. Welcome, welcome. I'm the director of our Center for Community Service and Justice. And Keely Cole, who is our faculty director for Community Engaged Scholarships, isn't here right now. We had a loss in our community last night. A student, a senior on campus, finally succumbed to cancer, unfortunately. And so she is over at the Mouse right now, Jean, and she was very close. So I'm honored to be here with you, and I'm really excited for the next couple of presentations. I just want to offer us all to do a brief introduction, and we do have some members of our Committee on Engaged Scholarship here, so definitely mention that. But Christian, can I ask you to start and go in this direction?
Sure.
Your name and maybe why you're here, why you want to be here.
Sure. My name is Christian Hall. I am a community organizer. I work on the York Road corridor with Strong City Baltimore. And we have a pretty strong partnership with the York Road Initiative, so I work out of that office and collaborate on helping find students meaningful projects in the community to work on.
Hi everyone, my name is Marie McSweeney Anderson, and I have the pleasure of working with Christian in the York Road office, which if you've ever been to York Road, it's in the old Ford dealership, and we have a big crab outside, so feel free to stop by. We have an open door policy. But I have the pleasure of working for Loyola, mainly within the community, so I have the wonderful, amazing, lovely opportunity to work with our local neighbors. Like some of the folks that are here today.
My name is Hong Zhu. I'm in Department of Accounting. I'm fill-in for Dr. Jalal Sarouche.
You're not a fill-in.
Okay, yeah, I'll be here. So that's the representative, consider representative from Cylinder School. Okay, very good. So, I'm glad to be here. And, I haven't served on this committee before, so there's going to be a lot to learn. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Bernadette Roach. I'm in the biology department, and I'm on the Engaged Scholarship Committee for the first time after a sabbatical from it for about, I guess, 3 or 4 years. So it's in this new configuration. And I also was happy to be able to sponsor Thomas on his Golden Ball. So his filed us all with his incredible work. So we're good to see that today.
Good morning. I'm Precious Freeland from Golden Life Counseling Center. I am their outreach specialist and also the garden manager. And I love community engagements. I love being a part of the community. And I'm here today because Thomas and I did a project on the Cold Grant. And he did a wonderful job with helping us with better the garden and helping our participants with cooking classes and so forth. And so I want to be a support for him also.
Hi, my name is Thomas O'Brien. I am a junior here. I'm an economics major with an environmental sustainability minor. I am here today to present some of the research that I did alongside Precious, Christian, Marie. It was a collaborative effort, Dr. Roche. So it's fun and exciting to kind of look at our findings today and see how we can use these data points to incite real community change and future initiatives that will further empower communities here in Baltimore.
I'm Kate Miller. I'm the Assistant Director of Service Learning here at Loyola. I've been here for about 6 years, and my role is to, much like Marie, kind of help make connections, hopefully introducing faculty to community partners and facilitating that process a little bit. Whether it's for research or for teaching classes that are engaged in service as part of that. And I'm really excited. I guess I also sit on the Committee on Engaged Scholarship, and I'm really excited to hear about our research that's been done in the past year.
Good afternoon. I'm Leah Saul. I'm Assistant Professor of Literacy here. I'm also in the Engaged Scholarship Committee. But I'm also going to be presenting some research today that is ongoing. So I'm excited to hear your findings. I don't have any findings yet, but we're kind of just beginning this partnership. Dr. Lisa Schoenbrot and I with the Maryland Department of Disabilities, with the, let me get it right, the Maryland Public and Police and Correctional Training Commission. More to come in a minute. So excited to be here.
Hi, my name is Teresa Robertson. I'm a PhD candidate in Loyola's Pastoral Counseling Program, and here today partnered with Brenda, who will introduce herself in a moment, we're concerned with trying to find ways to help people in Maryland, in Baltimore City and Baltimore County, who are on public sex offender registries to be able to deal with the negative spiritual and psychological collateral consequences of the public shaming and stigmatization that comes with that.
And I'm Brenda Jones, and I'm the Executive Director of FAIR, which is Families Advocating Intelligent Registries. And our constituents are largely the persons on a registry or their family members. And we've recently launched some support groups, which is part of where we tapped in together with Teresa. So we'll be sharing how we work together on that.
And I am Jill Hansen with the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. I am here for Julie Ryder, who is on the Engaged Committee on Engaged Scholarship, on that committee. But I also get to work with some of these folks through IRB, so I'm excited to listen to these projects and hear the outcome. So.
Thank you, Jill, and that's a perfect segue. So just so you all know, the next round of Called Back applications are due on the 18th of January. So please encourage your peers and your colleagues, both on the community side as well as on the faculty side and student side, to apply. And then my last plug, just very quickly, is that on our website here on the CCSJ website are other opportunities for funding for community engaged learning and scholarship. These are the mini grants that we offer that the Committee on Engaged Scholarship processes on a rolling basis, so do not hesitate to apply for these at any time. So I'm going to bring up our first team to present here. I just want to say that it appears we have basketball practice going on, so I'm going to encourage you all to just raise your hand if you can't hear quite well. And so, comments and questions, do you want to come up? Our format is going to be, we have about 15 minutes per team, and I'll try to have some timekeeping as appropriate. And feel free to eat, etc.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here. Precious and I are very excited to share some of the work that we have been doing together over at Glenwood Life. Glenwood Life, well, why don't I let Precious speak to what Glenwood Life is and what they do.
Glenwood Life Counseling Center is a methadone maintenance program dealing with opiate addictions. Also, we recently began to do a buprenorphine project along with individuals in our intensive outpatient program. So those individuals, they're not mandated or they don't have to be with the Medicaid assisted side of that. We also offer mental health services as of last month, so we're really excited about that. We'll be able to address those mental illnesses issues that the patients have instead of sending them out to other outside agencies. We do a lot of therapeutic activities. We do individual counseling, we do group counseling. Also, we do peer-led groups. So what's so special about that is that we have peers that are in long-term recovery that facilitate groups for the patients. Patients tend to gravitate to those groups more because they reported that those peers are able to understand them a little bit more because they've been through the struggle with disease of addiction. So it is our goal that we get more peers in long-term recovery to facilitate more groups.
So we start here. So this is a map. It's the Maryland Food System map that was created by the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future. And if you look here where this little peg is, that is where Glenwood Life is located. Loyola is right over here, and just, I don't know, a mile, maybe a little less down the road, there's Glenwood Life. So I'm just going to gauge the room quickly. Have we heard of food insecurity and food deserts before? Okay, so are we aware that the terminology has changed? So no longer are they actually referred to as food deserts, but they're referred to as healthy food priority areas. So the literature is putting forth this new terms because it's not necessarily that food is absent in these environments, but it's an imbalance between healthy and unhealthy foods that really exist. So Glenwood Life is an interesting spot right here because it stands at the fault lines of a few different areas, and it obviously has patients that come from a variety of neighborhoods surrounding. So we have Glenwood Life stands right in a USDA low income and low food access zone, and also it is further challenged by a lack of food stores and grocery stores. And then of course these red areas here are the healthy food priority areas. So because it stands at such a central point to all these different dimensions of this map, it offers a rich environment to study how people experience food challenges, whether that be food insecurity or challenges related to that. So the inspiration for this study really comes from the York Road Initiative's 2013 Food Access Survey. So they did this study and they were looking into the specific barriers that people in northern Baltimore City faced. And you can see these points right here. But what captured me the most was that Brett Kirkpatrick, the research coordinator on that study, talked about the knowledge and ability factors that are often overlooked when looking at food acquisition and food improvement in neighborhoods. So the knowledge component and the ability component of community members who experience food challenges really inspired me to look into the ways in which we could empower the community members and possibly improve or work with them in a collaborative way to improve their overall well-being. So this further evolved into our research, our collaborative research. And we wanted to see if we were to introduce a structured nutrition program to Glenwood Life Counseling Center, it would allow us to look at a unique cross-section of individuals who are experiencing drug addiction and possibly food-related challenges. It's not to say that all people at Glenwood Life are experiencing food insecurity, but some are, given that they come from, all participants came from a 5-mile radius of Glenwood Life. So we really wanted to zone in on how we can create a strategic approach that looked into how we can give people the tools, such as basic cooking techniques and nutritional knowledge, and how we could work with them. All right.
So the expansion of Glenwood Life construction, we in the beginning were 1,200 square feet community garden. Over the summer, that was doubling the size with the help of Thomas. Speaking to a lot of our patients, I asked a couple of them, what are some memorable things that they wanted me to report today? So one of the things that they talked about was the commitment from Thomas. So when we have community members come through our building, it's always a delight to our patients because so many community members and visitors tend to be afraid of the unknown, which is the disease of addiction. And having Thomas there to show that he did have this commitment to our patients, to our program, and to our community. A lot of our patients reported that they would stand by and see this young man sweaty, doing hard work, working countless hours, and they really appreciate the work that he did. And the finished product of the work was Thomas himself built the extra 4 raised beds. And in those 4 raised beds, we were able to plant more food for the community and for our patients, and to share with our local food pantry.
Yes, so just for clarification purposes, the Koldenbach grant and the CELS grant helped me carry out this project. So this component, the expansion of the Glenwood Life Garden, which was originally started by Precious and Rebuilding Together Baltimore representatives. So this was a project that was carried out under the CELS scholarship. And then the next component is the interactive cooking course and educational cookbook, which was funded in part by the Koldenbach grant. So the next component, the cooking courses. So for 2 hours a day, for 2 hours on every Tuesday, beginning in early June and going on until early August, we partnered with Glenwood's Intensive Outpatient Program that offers structured communal treatment, and we introduced a recovery course that was focused around nutrition and cooking literacy. So this was a course that was based on experiential model where where members of IOP would participate in the mechanics of the meal. They would participate in everything from the cleaning to the preparation to the cooking to the sharing of the meal. So it was a really holistic approach to eating and cooking. And following those, we would have reflections, dialogue that would contribute to the experiences that members would have involving their food-related challenges. So from there, we also would take the time to explore interactive tools such as shopping list formats, couponing tips, things like that. And then all that knowledge was then kind of culminated and put into an educational cookbook. So we didn't want to just throw recipes at the community because obviously people have varying degrees in their ability to cook and are limited by different resource constraints and things like that. So we wanted to basically start at the bottom where we could go on this journey with them. So we introduced approachable recipes that were very basic but could be very rewarding, very satisfying, nutritious, and are not taking a long time in the kitchen to make. So the idea was time effective, nutritional, and easy to make, easy to follow. And then in addition to that, it had educational elements such as preparation techniques, shopping tips, things like that, what's in season, charts like that, very interactive and user-friendly model. So this is the cover. There are circulations of the cookbook around Glenwood. I know I had to print more. I don't have any on me today, unfortunately. But that's just one of the meals that we prepared on the right in Glenwood IOP room.
So 6 patients out of almost over 15 patients in intensive outpatient. After Thomas left, I went in the back and did some, findings with them and found out that 6 of the patients still are cooking out of the cookbook. We have one gentleman who reported that he did not know how to cook at all and not even knew how to boil an egg. But doing this cooking class, he's now learned the basics, like Thomas explained, being able to cook and eat healthy because he does suffer from diabetes and some gastrointestinal issues. So he was very happy with the cooking class. The patients are still using the cookbook, and 2 of them reported that they have started making seasonings, which we will be bringing out next summer at the farmers market. So they have been taking some of the herbs and so forth, and everyone made sure today. Are you going to see Thomas? Yeah. So they were very proud of the cooking class. They were very excited. In the beginning, it was some, them being reluctant, but as time went on, they began to be very excited and look forward to their days of the cooking class, and they're still around there cooking and bringing meals. And one lady, she actually copied off of Thomas' shrimp meal. So she reported she did not use the same noodles he did, but she did use spaghetti noodles.
Okay, so this project, this community-based participatory project was hinged on a pre-project and post-project survey model. So we created a modified survey that pulled knowledge from the USDA's food security survey and the University College of London's General Nutritional Knowledge Questionnaire. So we felt that it was important to assess both elements to see what their food security status might be like and where they stood as a baseline in terms of their nutritional knowledge. So there was 3 segments of this survey. The first was just simply demographics. The second was where they stood on the spectrum of nutritional understanding. It asked questions such as, basic definitional understanding to, the relationship between food and diseases and things like that. And then it also asked questions that, zoned in on their purchasing behaviors at grocery stores and what their fridge and their meals looked like on a daily basis. So to begin, the sample size was about 14 individuals were enrolled that took the pre-project survey. And then as time went on, our sample increased just because word spread and people became involved. And because people could self-select when they were coming to this class, we kind of had a shifting population or a shifting sample size. So certain days we'd have around to like 23, sometimes it would be around like 15, but on average we had about probably 18, but 17 individuals by the end of the survey. The one thing that is important to specify is that only 7 individuals took the survey through and through because of attendance reasons and because of scheduling. Just we only had that specific set of paired data, so we could only follow 7 individuals through and through. So we applied the Mann-Whitney U test, which is a non-parametric statistical test that basically just allowed us to look at the significance of these 7 individuals first. And then we expanded that to general trend analysis, where we looked at the total sample size, that being the 17 people. And we looked at the changes in their mean scores, for instance, like on their general nutritional knowledge test, we looked at the percentile changes and things like that. So now we get into the results here. So I'll first direct your attention to question 5, where it asks participants to rate or identify their eating habits. So, and looking at, and this is in looking at it in a general trend analysis, we weren't able to statistically find significance in this data due to the small sample size and the shifting population. But looking at it in a general trend sense, looking at the means, we can see that people were more likely to rate their eating habits as good. So we see moving from fair to good, which is a positive change. And you'll see the difference in colors. So the numbers shaded in green represent a non-significant positive shift, and the red show a negative non-significant shift. This is like the food composition, the food pantry and fridge composition at their homes. So you'll notice a lot of red, which might be concerning initially to see no change at all, no significant change. But what we've come to see in our analysis is that the time constraint of this project, that being that it was only 7 weeks or so, was rather limiting. And on average, it takes about like 66 days for a habit to form. So if this project were to be extended, we might see more changes in what they're purchasing. It's just hard to see it under such a narrow time frame. The additional questions that are involved in this this part of the test is that we see a general trend increase in how the fruit intake, and we also see a general concern for the nutritional content increasing of the patients. So yes, we decided to focus on the general trends because we could hold on to this data and we could see where we could improve in the future and where we could go. So this is the second component. This is the general nutritional knowledge aspect of it. There are many questions, but the four broad categories are definitional understanding, relationship between food and disease, general accepted food guidelines, and like things like food identification. So in terms of very basic nutritional knowledge, we saw an increase in things like people's ability to identify that like salt leads to hypertension, like increased amounts of salt and things like that. So you also saw people, improving their ability to identify basic food vocabulary in terms of what a nutrient was, what a calorie was, and things like that. Where we saw people struggling a little bit was where they applied this knowledge, and again, this can be this application of the knowledge where it really becomes important in their daily lives. That can be strengthened by extending the scope of this project and the length of it, and that comes down to like things like acknowledging what a good plant-based protein might look like, how to choose like the optimal food combinations on like a plate, and of course something pertinent is like how do we deal with food-related illnesses like diabetes, like and how we can use food as a medicine for us.
Is an example of an optimal.
So like that would be like a balance between like carbohydrates and proteins and things like that. Making it really comes down to like the portion size of the plate, ability to recognize that like the more color on the plate, the healthier the meal, things like that. Yeah.
Can you go back?
Sure.
I would just encourage you maybe when you are thinking about your results again. A lot of times a negative trend in self-report data is actually a positive. So for example, people before you worked with them may not have had a good understanding of that question and what it means. So they may have been able to more accurately represent their knowledge afterward. So you may have increased their literacy of their understanding of those kinds of components, and therefore they're able to more accurately represent their knowledge, whereas before they weren't able to. So one thing that I've noticed in looking at a lot of your data is kind of those negative trends, but I would just encourage you, there's some research that supports it, and I can send it along to you if you're writing this up, to say that that may not be a negative. Or necessarily even related to the amount of time.
Wonderful, thank you. I'd love to know more. So looking at emergent themes during the pre-project, the pre and post-project discussions. So in taking notes during our cooking classes, these are some of the general statements that were made, and it's assessed based on the mental health benefits, physical health benefits, familial benefits, community benefits that patients experience during the course. So it outlines their hopes and their wishes for the course and like how the course actually delivered upon these things. So though we do not have statistical significant data due to the small sample size, but of course it requires further analysis of that, we see that there's a lot of things that can't be quantified by the numbers that this emergent trend analysis helps us look at. That people were looking at themselves in a better light, that they were more likely to cook for the families, to sit down, to participate in the garden, things like that. I think we had about a 35% increase in awareness of the garden, and then about 15% increase in the participation in the garden. So, as you can see here, they're not all things that can be counted, but it was really gratifying for us to hear, just the ways in which this recovery course played into not only their journey, their road to recovery, as we say, but to their greater sense of well-being.
A lot of them were afraid to go over to the garden. I explained to Thomas The main reason is they have this theory by being on a medication, which is methadone, is that they have this feeling of if they work too hard in the garden, they will spread their methadone out. Wanting to go over there, but still having that fear that physically they would feel the changes in their medication. So we were able to talk them through that, develop a small plan that they can go over maybe like 15, 20 minutes. So we did see more participation, not only with the patients, but with the staff as well.
So looking forward and looking back a little bit, you know, this project was definitely challenged by the small sample that we could look at through and through. We weren't able to apply, you know, the statistical test that we wanted because we couldn't get the power because of just the small number of the sample. But what we would like to do looking forward is to follow this group of individuals for a longer period of time and possibly offer an incentive for these individuals. Maybe temporary food assistance could be a possible option, or maybe like, you know, gift cards for as a form of compensation of their time. But we feel as though, based on the emergent trends and what we saw in the classroom and in the garden, that this empowerment method, this intervention of providing people with the tools and the knowledge to better their situations and do it as a community has a really healing effect. And we feel as though you know, this endeavor needs to continue because, you know, the food challenges evolve, and you know, our care and our approach to that must evolve with it, and it must be rooted in the community's needs.
Very nice job.
Wonderful. Teresa, next.
Okay.
Pass her. Okay, great. Just promise not to read them until we're done. Okay.
Do you want me to pass them at the end or no?
No, it's fine.
You can pass these at the end.
I don't know what that is, but I'm going to struggle to.
Sure. I thought it was lunch.
It's not lunch.
No, not lunch. You guys will get these.
So, this project, well, the name of the project is a bit different, but it's part of everything on, but really we're looking at an approach to therapy. It's called compassion-focused therapy. It was developed about 10 years ago in England by a man named Dr. Paul Gilbert at the University of Derby, and it's pretty much taken hold internationally, but mostly in Australia and Europe, not so much here. There's not a whole lot going on here. But it seemed to me like it would be a perfect fit for this particular population. So I developed this project. One of the reasons I did, there we go. So, well, okay, before I get into all that, I just want to shout out to all the people that made it happen. You know, it really was. I felt like I was a wedding planner for a wedding of like 500 people, and I had no staff. And it would not have been possible without a lot of the support I got, including from the Kohler-Bach grant, the National Board of Certified Counselors Women's Minority Fellowship Program, and my chair and my methodologist. There lots of support from lots of people, so thank you. So what motivated us to do this, or me in particularly, and from knowing Brenda, I think all the work that she does, which is almost all completely volunteer and way over the top in terms of time and energy, is compassion. so which fits right in. So, you know, what compassion is in terms of the way CFT perceives it and the way that I perceive it as well, it's two things. It's a sensitivity to the suffering of ourselves or others, with a desire and a motivation to alleviate and prevent that suffering. There's some really interesting neuroscience that's out lately that shows this very, very, very distinct difference between empathy and compassion. And their findings indicate that empathy actually increases negative affect, whereas compassion not only will bring us back to baseline when the empathy has taken us up, but also improves positive affect at the same time. So we don't know a lot about these constructs, but we're learning more.
Wait, can you say that again one more time? I don't think I wrapped my head. So
Okay, yeah,
empathy
so
is a
empathy,
negative emotion.
empathy is not a negative emotion, it increases negative affect. So they're doing fMRI research in neuroscience between looking at the difference between compassion and empathy. And what they found is that empathy, when we're cultivating and practicing empathy, we increase negative affect.
So we feel worse.
We feel more depressed, we feel sad. And you can imagine that, you know, I mean, we've all experienced empathy, and it really kind of is a heavy kind of feeling, right? Empathy is actually a piece of compassion, you know, but empathy not wrapped in compassion, so will basically cause burnout. I mean, I'm a pastoral counselor, and we're trained to be empathic, so we're basically training ourselves to burn out. But if we wrap that in compassion with this second piece, and compassion's not feeling the emotion, it's being sensitive to it, but with this desire and motivation to alleviate and prevent it. That what the neuroscience research, and if anybody's interested in the articles, I could send them to you, indicates that so they'll do the test. I don't want to take too much time with it because so they measure someone who's practicing empathy, and the negative affect increases. Then afterwards, they measure the same people who are practicing compassion, and they go back to baseline. The negative affect goes back up to baseline, but at the same time, positive affect is improving. Okay, so. Got it. All right. I'm not a neuroscientist either, but I'm really good at reading the discussion section. So basically, I'm going to let Brenda. This thing is laid out kind of along those lines. So Brenda's going to talk about the suffering. Then I'm going to talk about the motivation and desire to compassion part.
Right. So if you're not real familiar with registries, what you may know indirectly is that that they're supposed to be improving public safety by providing this access to information on the registry. The issue that we face, unfortunately, is that it's largely based on a myth, because it was based on a Psychology Today article which stated that recidivism is frightening and high, and that there's no known cure, which is true if you're talking about pedophilia, but the vast number of people on a registry don't fit that description at all. And so what it has done is set the stage for, if you're on the registry, you've been humanized. You're no longer a human being, you're a monster, you're a danger, you're a threat. And so this, needless to say, causes a whole lot of stress and pressure on persons who are on the registry. This is more the actual facts that you can see here. You can see, obviously really high numbers of persons who've been convicted of sexual offenses. The new offenses are not somebody on the registry, so it's not even working for public safety. Most are somebody known by the family, so this whole stranger danger thing is a myth, which is also part of what the registry is based on. And recidivism is actually extremely, extremely low for most persons on the registry. So here we've got this population of people that they're just like you or me. They've been in a bad situation. They probably have been involved. Maybe they had a drug problem in the past or an alcohol problem in the past. They at a bad point in their life, something happened. They committed a crime. Yes, but they're done, they're trying to move on, and now the world has said, you can't move on. Your crime that you did 30 years ago is up there as if you did it yesterday. You're a monster, too bad. Yes?
Low risk here is low risk for recidivism.
Yes. Yes. So recidivism, in particular, and I think in this particular instance, we're talking about recidivism specifically of sex-related crime. Yeah. Okay. And let's see, that also you? Yes. Well, I get started anyway. So, then you can come in and help out a little bit. So collateral consequences that you get with public registration, if you're on a registration list, I can guarantee you that there's an awful lot of places that will not rent to you. Or if you do, you sometimes get drummed out shortly thereafter. Employment is extremely difficult because the person's employment address is put on that registry. And so people show up at the address, they can't, they don't know, oh, well, no, you can't work here. Or if somebody starts harassing your boss. Your boss may be really forward thinking, but then the people come in and say, I'm not gonna come to this car wash anymore. I found out that you've got a sex offender working here. There's a lot of threats, harassment, a lot of stuff that gets hit. You've got a target on your back when you're on the registry because somebody could go and look you up, and there's drive-bys, just all kinds of problems. Then there's just simply the internalized issues. You're already ashamed of yourself for whatever you did, or for what everybody thinks you did, in case it was you actually were just framed or something. There's all that stress that goes along with this situation. This population is extremely isolated. I'm constantly being told I'm the only one that feels it. And so some of what we'll talk about later is that they're shocked to find out that there are thousands and thousands of people in the exact same boat because they are so isolated they have no idea. Depression, anxiety, all of those things. So, Teresa, you may want to wrap some of that in with the passion.
Yeah, so this is the sensitivity to the suffering. So the research literature clearly indicates that people on public registries for sexual offenses suffer deeply. I didn't look at housing, employment, and specific threats. I looked at these. There's very, very little research done in terms of the impact of spirituality and people on the registry, but the little teeny bit that has been done, 2 of the studies actually for people from Loyola, surprise, and the pastoral counseling department, indicate clearly that these people think that religion and spirituality are important in terms of their recovery. And there's one study that was done by Tewksbury and Muskane that talks about that folks found their religion, spirituality, prayer, and/or meditation to be really important in terms of coping with getting on with their lives. So that's a little bit on that. I didn't put spirituality up here because it's the research is so limited. But there's tons of research in terms of how it affects them psychologically, with increased levels of shame, stress, isolation, depression, hopelessness. So, the goals of the project basically were twofold. Number one was to determine if CFT would improve a sense of intrinsic worth and value, improve levels of compassion for others, compassion for self, and also their ability to receive compassion. A lot of folks feel like, they internalize the monster thing. It's like, I'm worthless, I'm no good. And so they can't even be open to any kind of compassion coming in. Also, wanting to look at decreasing levels of different psychological symptomology, and to find out if the interventions that CFT offers in terms of psychoeducation and compassionate techniques would help with, could be a component that could be introduced into fearless groups, and you have some information on fearless groups there, much like what you were talking about, Precious, in terms of this peer-to-peer idea. They started in Nebraska. Brenda will talk a little bit more about them and how powerful they can be for people on this, but to see if this could, so one of the parts of the regular meetings of Fearless is an educational component. And, you know, do these techniques work, and could they be introduced to people in these Fearless groups? In terms of methodology, so there are a little over 1,800 people on the registry in Baltimore City and Baltimore County, so that was my universe. That was this I was going to draw from. My hope was to get a minimum of 60 people to participate. I was only, and so I thought I could do that, 60 people. You know, I'll do a little bit of a sample here. I'll send out recruitment letters to 25% of these 1,800 people, and I'll have my 60 people, right? So I randomly selected 25% of the 1,800, and there weren't nearly enough. So I said, okay, I'll do another sample and another. So I ended up sampling every single one. It was not no sample. It was recruitment letters went to the over 1,800 people who were on the registry in Baltimore City County, as long as they were not listed as absconded or non-compliant. And there were a handful of them, so they were included. I ended up with a total of 30 participants. I'll talk a little bit about that. The intervention was so I conducted 6 8-week CFT groups. There were 2 waves, and there were 3 groups, 3 CFT groups in each of them. The first wave happened, so there was an assessment period. The first wave happened, the treatment began and ended. They were assessed again. The second wave started, they were assessed for their second time. Then at the end of that 8 weeks, they were assessed for a third time, and the folks who were in wave 1 came back for another. So wave 1 had a fallow period of 8 weeks at the end, and wave 2 a fallow period of 8 weeks at the beginning. Everyone could earn the maximum of $250, so that's why I was one of the reasons I was sure I would get a sample of 60. I didn't, and I can tell you that one of the reasons is because folks in this population have a really bad taste in their mouth about therapy. Most are mandated to attend therapy. The therapeutic approaches that are used focus solely on the sex, so it's called sex offender specific therapy. That's what most people are mandated to attend, and it is shame-based. And most folks, so one of the reasons that I am convinced, and I talked with the 30 guys about this, who did attend, to get confirmation from things that I've heard. And yeah, it's like, and a lot of the people were really leery. The 30 people that did end up were pretty leery about it. So maybe $500. I don't know. What's it take? So I didn't bring in I didn't bring in any statistics, frankly, because of the 15 minutes, and I could get carried away. But I'm happy to send anyone any results you might want in terms of the actual data. I have about 20 pages written up in the results section. So. but just overall, I did let me tell you, how am I on time? Yeah. Okay. I was telling Brenda earlier, never ask a dissertation or a doc student about their dissertation research, because you just kind of like, I start seeing people glaze over and go, oh, I'm doing it again. But so anyway, initially I wanted the design was set up, as an interrupted time series, so that hence the fallow periods before and after. Deal was the folks who were in wave 2, their first measurement and second measurement, all of the variables should be the same. They should remain the same. There's no treatment, right? And then once they start the treatment, right? So what happened was during the first 8 weeks, both waves increased. So the folks that were not getting the treatment, their levels of depression, stress, hopelessness, anxiety decreased. Their levels of spirituality increased when there was no treatment. They did increase even more once they got the treatment, but it was quite a significant increase while there was no treatment happening. So I went ahead and ran that analysis, those MANOVAs anyway, to look for treatment effects and got some, but I didn't. But I just did that because I said I was going to do it. And then I altered the analysis. So in one sense, this research design really did what it was supposed to do. It clearly indicated that there's some confounding factors going on. Because of these I have so many brain
First Monday of the month.
So the actual study design did what it was supposed to do in terms of alerting me to the fact that there are confounds here. So I adjusted the analysis so that I took out all the gains that were made during that fallow period for wave 2 and created just simply pre and post scores for both groups. And so there's fallow periods at either end. And when I did that, there were still treatment effects, and the treatment effects that arose were that of self-compassion was increased for folks, shame and stress were decreased for folks. Also, so the big winners really were self-compassion and spiritual transcendence. Spiritual transcendence, and these are so prayer fulfillment, universality, and connectedness are the three facets of spiritual transcendence. All of them change significantly as when looking at the pre and post test and leaving out the gains that were made when no one was receiving treatment. Also, I should mention that I controlled for personality. So those significant increases were over and above what might be expected from personality. Oftentimes when spirituality is used as a measure, there are complaints that you're not measuring spirituality, you're measuring personality. So controlling for personality, able to demonstrate incremental validity and say, well, no, this is over and above what was considered. All right, so the other thing I did was look at self-compassion, and spirituality as their power of changes in those things in terms of predicting changes in other things. The only one that was significant was self-compassion. So changes in self-compassion significantly predicted changes in shame, depression, and hopelessness in the direction that I would hope they would. So as self-compassion increased, changes in self-compassion increased, then changes in depression, shame, and hopelessness marked significant changes in a negative direction. So these things increased. I'm not jumping at this.
No,
okay. So implications for reduced suffering. So this is not my research. This is just some of the literature that so when you talk about people on sex offender registry, most people do have that monster frame, and they're not thinking in lines of compassion when they think about people on sex offender registries. So it's there. And the suffering that we're talking about here isn't just, I believe firmly that the suffering of the folks who are the registries and their families is important, very, very critically important, and that their needs are not being met. I see it as a human rights issue, frankly. If indeed all humans have the same intrinsic worth and human value, then that's all humans. Because I'm a Quaker too, and there is that God in everywhere. But the other thing is the suffering. Some of this is here because the suffering goes beyond. This particular intervention not only can help the people who are on the registry, but also other people who suffer, immensely and sometimes unthinkably because of sexual abuse. And those are the victims, their families, and our community. So self-compassion has been demonstrated to actually decrease criminogenic factors. So we're talking about decreasing the incidence of sexual abuse. This is also tied into the registry because, as Brenda spoke to, it's not working. It's not effective. It's been 20 years that we've had this registry, and what it keeps doing is expanding and expanding and expanding. And there are nearly 1 million people in this country on the registry today, nearly 1 million. Many of them are children. It is the median age of people who are on the registry at the time of their conviction was 14. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with this that the community is not really aware of, the public's not aware of. And lawmakers, we've talked to both of them have talked to lawmakers, and most of them are aware. My experience with, I live in Pennsylvania, so lawmakers I talk to in Pennsylvania, Brenda talks to there. So the lawmakers, but many of the lawmakers I talk to are fully aware of the research that indicates registries are not effective, that they hurt families and children, they're not protecting the public, and what I get is, you know what? This is political suicide. I can't do anything but vote yes for this, and there's no way I'm going up against it. So in the meantime, our communities are not becoming safer. Things like this can be, if we can start focusing on where we need to focus, like decreasing criminogenic factors, by doing things like increasing compassion for folks instead of putting them in shame-based treatment. There's Johns Hopkins runs the Moore Center for the Prevention of Child Sexual Abuse. Elizabeth Letourneau, fabulous woman, and she's worked that the Moore Center for the Prevention of Child Abuse does not support public registries because they want to prevent child sexual abuse. They are motivated, they have a desire to alleviate and prevent the suffering. And we're putting all our money, all our energy into something that increases suffering, not just for the people on the registry, but also for us in general. Did I do that? Or are you trying to get me to shut up?
No.
You need to wrap it up.
Yeah. So
Let's wrap it up.
Yeah. So the fearless groups is where we tie back in, and this is just a quick summary of the goals of a fearless group, which is a support group. The little piece that we passed around from Sample Pool and Bensel came out, as you can see, just last year, where they did a study of one of the older fearless groups from Nebraska. They've been around for about 5 years, just in a couple of states. And it's, we end up calling them fearless because fear is a large factor in the challenges faced by this population. And you're afraid to go out, you're afraid to move forward in life. And so the goal of the treatment is, or the support groups, is that we try to move beyond that. It is peer-to-peer, no state people at all. And the model that we're moving toward is with FAIR. We just have one group going here, and it's fairly new. But Teresa's going to be working with us to see how we can incorporate some, at least in the educational portion, some of the things that come out of that compassion focused treatment. So we're real excited to see how that moves along. And so what we passed around, the fearless things with the fist bumps there, you can get a sense of what the structure of a meeting would look like. And then we passed around the sample thing, which gives you a nice researcher's point. Okay.
I have a couple copies of the Sample et al. Article on fearless groups if anybody's interested. Plus the, sorry, carry away.
Oh, fun. You have swag.
I got swag. Tell my grandchildren that, will you? I don't believe it.
Yeah, I think we have a park over here. Yeah.
Yes.
It's fine, my notes are here.
You might be able to see me as well, that's all right. Hi everyone, thanks for giving me a chance to chat. Unlike the last two projects, LEAD, which is training self-advocate educators for people with disabilities to work with law enforcement, is an ongoing project. So sadly, we'll have to come back and report when we have our results. But Dr. Leah Saul, the literacy professor, assistant professor of literacy in the education department, and I'm doing this work. My co-PI is Dr. Lisa Schoenbrook, who is the chair of speech pathology. And this is a three-pronged partnership between Loyola, Maryland Department of Disabilities, as well as the Police Training Commission for Maryland. So what is this project? This project is the result of a request for proposals from the Maryland Department of Disabilities and came directly out of Ethan Saylor's death. So people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are much more likely to have encounters with the police and other first responders, yet we know that they have some communication difficulties and challenges that can really lead to misunderstandings and unfortunately tragic consequences. And Mr. Ethan Saylor was one of those people who had one of these tragic consequences. He was in a movie theater in Ellicott City, Maryland. I'm not sure if people are familiar with this story. He was a person with an intellectual disability. He was asked to leave the movie theater. He had really enjoyed the movie. He wanted to stay within the theater view and watch it again, essentially. While his caregiver went out to the car, unfortunately, two off-duty police officers who were working security inside the theater separated in the certainly it came out of a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of miscommunications, a lot of lack of training on how to work with people with disabilities, not just with law enforcement, but also with all first responders, essentially. So the Alliance was created as a result of legislation that came out of his death. The RFP aimed at providing increased training for members of law enforcement and other public service entities to really be able to specifically work with individuals with disabilities focused on people with ID and DD. It mandated, as a result of this alliance, that people with ID and DD were in fact trainers of law enforcement. So instead of speaking about people with disabilities, the idea would be that police would be speaking with and learning from people with disabilities. So our RFP was to develop a training for self-advocate educators to become police officer trainers. We received the grant in February of 2018. It's here, I think that's right. So the grant is ongoing, and I'm going to just kind of report on a little bit of what it is that we're working on and where we are. And like I said, hopefully in about a year I can come back and see where it went. So this is the model that we proposed as part of the grant. So LEAD stands for Law Enforcement, Academics, and Advocates working together to locally support self-advocate educators. It's a little difficult to see on this map, But the map behind the graphic is actually PG County. PG County was selected as the site for this grant by Maryland Department of Disabilities. This is a pilot that we are collecting data on and hope to push out to the rest of the state of Maryland. But PG County was chosen because it's viewed as a representative county of Maryland. It's rural, it's urban, and it's suburban. So first responders in PG County operate in a very large county with a very large demographic and a very diverse demographic. So our model was that our community-based advocacy organization, our Best Buddies of Maryland, was going to serve as our recruiter to recruit self-advocate educators to be part of our program. Lisa and myself designed all of the curriculum with the help of the PG County Police Training Commission, which was a very, and is a very interesting collaboration. I think it's a pretty unusual set of circumstances to be inside of police training. It is typically not something that is open to anybody, much less a researcher. And so not only to be welcomed in, but to be invited to offer our expertise and serve as resources to those who are heading up the curriculum was and is very unique and a pretty invaluable opportunity. So what are we doing as part of our self-advocate educator training? I guess one of the most important parts of this is a job, a very meaningful job for people with disabilities who are one of the populations more likely to be unemployed and long-term unemployed. So we created a job description with qualifications, and at the end of the day, their main job in serving as police advocate, self-advocate educators with police is to participate in role play and simulations to really help trainees and in-service officers to better develop those communication skills that are required when working with people with disabilities. So there were a number of qualifications, but it's a paid job. People get paid $15 an hour compensation to participate. And a key component was really that all of our SAEs had to understand that they were actors in these role plays. Certainly we are not trying to induce trauma or other negative affects. So having people understand and have some experience actually with being an actor in these role plays was really important. The other component was that they had to understand how to improv and have some training and be able to take training on improvisation. Because what we learned very quickly in developing this curriculum was that it could not be scripted. That essentially no police interaction or first responder interaction for that matter is a scripted interaction. Everything is very off the cuff and situation specific. So within the role plays, the self-advocate educators perform as improv actors essentially. And we taught them some improv techniques, which I'll get to in a second. But one of our big challenges in selecting participants was having people with some background in theater and also willingness to participate in this kind of experience. So we designed some screening around communication skills, sensory processing skills, and role-playing skills to decide not only who was willing to participate, but who was going to be a good fit for the pilot. So we selected 10 self-advocate educators following all of the screening assessments and the job interviews. So following consultation with police, the police academy trainers, as well as the commission, we developed 5 scenarios. I'm being recorded, right? It's been very interesting. I have to be very aware of when I am being recorded. So we've developed 5 scenario-based trainings to train police officers. Of those 5, 3 were selected to become part of the formal training process. Those include a bystander witness victim training in a public space or scenario, a request for assistance from a family member, and a missing person scenario. One very interesting thing about being in the position of an engaged scholar is we have the Police Training Commission on one side and the grant provider on the other side, and they have very different perspectives about what police officers perhaps would be trained on. For example, one really interesting concrete example that I can give you is that the commission was very concerned about individuals with disabilities being portrayed in a negative perspective. However, on the other side of that, police officers are not called, and first responders do not come unless that there is some sort of negative thing happening. So even just kind of navigating what would be part of this curriculum was a very interesting exercise in collaboration. So in training our self-advocate educators to become participants in this type of training, we held formal training sessions. There were 4 of them where we did things very much along the lines of what you would do to prepare for a theater activity. Everything from warm-up activities around emotions and being able to portray your emotions on your face in different ways. We introduced all of the role play scenarios where we modeled essentially the different roles so that they had a positive model to be able to view and learn from. Before incorporating the self-advocates into those role plays, one of the most interesting things we found was certainly neither Lisa nor I are very skilled in improvisation. We're both teachers, which I guess is somewhat part of that. But we found these really amazing, I guess they're kind of strategies around improvisation that are called NED, where all the people who do improv, where all the people who are involved in the improv scene provide feedback to one another, and it's kind of a structured way of going about that. So we gave all of the self-advocates NED cards, and so we would watch a scene, and then we would call the scene to a close, and everyone would raise one of the 3 letters to indicate to their peers what they could work on further in their role. So they could either provide more narration in the scene, they could provide more emotion in the scene, or needed to provide more detail in the scene. And we had all the cards also color-coded, so it was very interesting. At the end of the scene, you could literally see what color the room was. And it provided not only a very visual representation of that feedback, but it was also very interactive and very metacognitive on both sides, both for the actor and for the audience. And it allowed them to really work on those skills with one another in a non-threatening way. From there, we took the training to having some homework activities. So we mentioned that Best Buddies of Maryland is our additional partner, which means that all of our self-advocate educators are also paired with a member of the community as part of this Best Buddies program. And so they would then take their role play and practice outside of these trainings with their buddies so that they had some extended practice. So I mentioned that this is an ongoing event. So far our SAEs have all been trained. They have participated in the September and October in-service police training sessions inside of PG County. And we are collecting both qualitative and quantitative data to measure the impact of their inclusion inside of the police training. So Lisa and I went and collected data before the SAEs were included, and then we're going to be collecting some post data. I will say the initial feedback, just what's the word? Informally, is very positive. It's very interesting because of PG's location. We had several DC police officers inside of our training session. They needed to get some extra hours, I suppose, and all of the DC police officers at the end of the training came up to us and said, we do not understand why this is not required by DC. And I guess that's kind of where I would leave. Maryland is the first state of all the states to require this kind of training. and this is the very first pilot of it. So we are very hopeful that it goes well. We are certainly learning a lot as we go. I think by the time I probably come back and talk to you more, it will change again. But that's our SAEs. One other final anecdotal. Ethan Saylor's mother, who was instrumental in passing the legislation, came to the October training, and she was blown away because it was very much what she envisioned in having people speak for themselves and be meaningful participants in the training.
So we have 5 minutes left. If there are any questions, I guess first of all, let's just give another round of applause. Any informal questions at our tables or questions for Leah since she jumped down?
I'm sorry.
Not at all.
We have one, Leah. I was wondering about, so working with your SAEs, what are some of the ways that their perspectives have sort of shifted or changed some of your and Lisa's work on the content of what goes into it?
So both of us have had quite a bit of experience working with people with IDDD and also with mental health disabilities. So I don't know if it necessarily changed our perspective or how we kind of design the content. I think we're frequently just blown away by their performance. I mean, essentially we hired 10 actors, and they are, of the people that you see on the screen, almost all of them have performed in formal theater. And so, I mean, it's just, you know that when you hire people, that they have skills and talents, and certainly you train them to do things, but I think the thing that I am most blown away by is how much better they get every time we go in. And also just having their authentic presence there, how much it impacts the officers. Again, this is just anecdotal, like I can't report any research yet, but there's a very hierarchical system in police training.
Turn on.
We can turn it on.
I'm like,